Good afternoon. This is Kathleen Smith, Chief Outreach Officer here at ClearedJobs.Net. We're doing another recruiter panel, helping our job seekers in the security cleared community get prepared for their job search and the upcoming job fair that we have next week. It is so exciting to have great companies who have fabulous recruiters willing to take some time out and really share their expertise and their advice. And I'm really happy to have someone that I've known for at least 15 years join us in the studio today. But first, Jessica, tell us a little bit about you and who you are recruiting for.
Sure. So I am a Senior Talent Acquisition Advisor with CACI, and we are recruiting for multiple contracts, multiple opportunities within the cleared space.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amy Zupovitz. Amy, you and I have known each other way. And should we just do a shout out to Bridget Freeman for us?
Of course. Love
Hey, Bridget.
Of course. Yes.
So, Amy, tell us about you.
So I'm a Senior Talent Acquisition Manager with Axiologic Solutions. We're always looking for great systems engineers, program project managers, full life cycle acquisition folks, cybersecurity folks, cloud integration, all that good stuff. We primarily support the intelligence community, as well as the DoD and the military.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as we get ready for next week's job fair, which is going to be one of the first in-person job fairs that many people have gone to, Jess, why don't you share with us some of the ways you think that people should prepare for the job fair, since some people might not be in the sort of practice of it?
No problem. So first off, the important thing is to make sure you've got a clean copy of your resume. Ideally, for a job fair in the cleared space, you will indicate on your resume what clearance you possess and what clearances you have had in the past. So which is active and current, and what you've held in the past. That would be part one. Part two is make sure you know when you're going to the job fair what types of positions you are really most interested in, so that you can articulate that to the recruiters and they can help align you to some of the openings that there are. And then lastly, have a conversation piece that you can open up with to make that conversation with the recruiters easy. They will do the same back for you. But just something to think about, know what companies are going to be there and why you might be interested in that particular company, just to say hello.
Wonderful. Yes. So we always make sure that there is the job seeker handbook that we publish here on LinkedIn and on our SlideShare account, that all of the job seekers who are coming to the job fair can actually look through the job seeker handbook, research each one of the companies and the positions that they're hiring for. But Amy, I was going to have you sort of expand upon what Jessica shared. Also, not everyone puts all of their positions in the handbook. So what recommendation do you have to a job seeker in addition to preparing for a job fair? Should they talk to every single company that's there, or should they target specific companies?
Yeah, I would say, thank you. I would say definitely pre-register for the job fair first and foremost. Plan ahead, know what companies are going to be there. I'd say target maybe your top 5 companies, do a little bit of research, not only with what jobs are out there, but also the company culture, the mission, read up on our company news, follow us on social media. And then, of course, always look at the jobs that are posted. But, how would you fit into our mission and our vision? That's really important. Just be organized, obviously be confident. Job fairs are just a really good way to network. It just provides you with really good interview practice at the very minimum. But yeah, just know what companies are going to be there, and definitely plan ahead and seek out the top, 3, 4, 5 companies that you're interested in stopping by and chatting with.
Great. Well, I also, in addition to knowing which top companies that you want to be able to talk with, I would also suggest add a little time into your overall job fair experience to talk to companies that are there that you may not have ever heard from or heard about, because not everyone has a very large advertising budget, and you may have heard of a company, but you may not know exactly what they do. So working on your networking skills, working on sort of your interviewing skills, if you have time, definitely go and talk to companies that, you know, you've never heard from, you've never heard about, and find out what they are, kind of work they do, and sort of, you know, do a little investigation, because you never know where your next job is going to come from. So let's move on to overall job search. So we've all had to change the way we've done business over the last 2 years. I mean, we were just sort of thrown into, this is no longer business as normal. So what are some of the common job search problems that job seekers do that they still need to focus on, even though we've sort of changed the environment? Amy?
So I think obviously still finding a good work-life balance has always been a problem. People are still insecure about the pandemic. You know, is this a good time to make a change? Sometimes job descriptions are a little bit hard to wade through at times, tend to be a little bit too long. So it's kind of difficult to figure out, you know, what the job really is, or sometimes they're too short. I know at Axiologic, we've kind of streamlined the application process to make that, you know, as kind of easy as possible. We've consolidated interviews to shorten the time it takes to make a hire. But I know candidates are still kind of suffering from, you know, lack of response from a recruiter. So we're really attuned to making sure that we're very responsive. Um, I think as a job seeker, you need to also be able to explain, you know, your gaps in employment. Gaps are okay, but obviously I would definitely address them. If you're less experienced, sometimes you have to look for jobs that, you know, have, you can, the education, check the education, check the, can you do years of experience in lieu of education? Um, you know, I think some of the less experienced job seekers connections, so make sure just to always use your network, things like that. Just be patient, give yourself a break. It's always stressful looking for a job. So just knowing how to search, knowing how to use your network, things like that, using your social media, checking out, you know, just companies of interest.
Wonderful. Jess, how about you? What are some of
Yeah,
the
and I would, tagging up on what Amy was saying, I think one of the issues, especially at big companies like CACI, can be figuring out how to find the right opportunity across the voluminous number of job recs that are out there. So my recommendation would be to refine your search. You know, if you're, let's say, a systems engineer, there could be thousands of systems engineer positions. So, you know, maybe do a search for Windows or Linux, or, you know, find particular keywords that might be more indicative if you're interested in the cloud space and that's where you want to focus. Do a search that delves a little bit deeper into your area of interest to see if you can filter down some of those requisitions. I think patience is another one. Sometimes requisitions are posted that might be for a bid versus a funded position. And it's not, you know, read the fine print, because sometimes there are clues in there that will explain why there may be a delay in response. I think the other, and this question is going to be coming up here, is looking at location, looking at what those requirements are versus what your requirements are as an employee, and try to manage and understand and know what your requirements are. Do you want to be partially remote? Do you want to have a standard set of work hours versus working on weekends or shift work? You know what those things are in advance so that you can have those pre-screen questions identified to rule out any jobs that aren't going to fit with your lifestyle.
That sounds great. So yeah, since you did a great teeing up, let's jump to that question right away, Jess. Let's talk a little bit about how do you, since remote or work from anywhere is a big thing that's a topic in the commercial world, but also in the government contracting world. How does a job seeker broach that topic in, you know, their initial conversation?
And I think the question speaks for itself. I think that question should be brought up front. If there's an expectation on the part of the employee that they're going to have flexibility on location or that they are able to telework, they need to be transparent about that or ask that question even of the recruiter right at the beginning. Some jobs will be posted with a specific location, but there is flexibility for remote work, and it may not be described in the requisition itself. So it's worth asking right away. I think we understand, especially in our space, that there's a lot of requirement now for people to telework. People are getting used to teleworking, may not want to go in person all the time. And a lot of our customers are becoming more flexible on that front. So it's certainly worth asking that question right off the bat.
Wonderful. Amy, anything to tag on to what
Yeah.
Jesse says?
Yeah, I agree with Jess. I think if working remotely is a top priority, it needs to be brought up at the very beginning, is to see if the position offers it. I think, finding hybrid or remote work is great. But we also don't want to waste your time if it's not something that we can offer. And I think a good way to ask that as a job seeker would be, do you support remote work, or will most of the people I work with, be on site, things like that. It'll just give you a good idea of the environment, or your possible options, but definitely at the very beginning.
Yep. And I have seen many people put that right onto their resume as well, if that's a preference. Some people say remote work only, some people say telework preferred. You can put that right at the beginning of your resume so the recruiter's aware before you even talk.
And one thing that I would just add to this is that there's a lot of frustration in the government contracting community about if I can go remote or not. And one of, I should say, the silver linings of the pandemic is the fact that we already had so much infrastructure in place to go remote and to do telework. And it is evolving within the community. So as both Jesse and Amy have said about some other things, it's really look at the patients. They may not be remote now, but there may be something in the future. So please stay within the cleared community. Please stay looking for jobs that are in the security cleared community, and do ask that question about remote work right up front, because there are many opportunities and many evolving environments that are supporting that. So one thing that I always love about doing these recruiter panels is to give sort of the background on what a recruiter or talent acquisition professional does, because so many times there's bashing of recruiters that they don't, they're not doing their job, they're slow, they're lazy. There's unfortunately a lot of memes out there that don't paint recruiters in the best of lights. So let's just sort of give a little background to our audience as to how many requisitions do you handle and how many hiring managers do you talk to? So Amy, take it away.
Yep. So Axiologic, smaller company, about 250 people. We've got 2 or 3 recruiters. Each recruiter has probably 15 to 20 recs, and working with about 10 to 12 hiring managers. That's what our current state is.
Okay. And how about you, Jess?
It is similar. CACI is a little bit bigger, so we have a bigger staff of recruiting. I would say on best practice, we typically will have about somewhere between 25 to 30 requisitions per recruiter. And that will be across 2 to 3 different contract programs. And that will be maybe both cleared and uncleared. And typically somewhere between 12 to 15 hiring managers.
Wonderful. We're getting a lot of questions in, so I'm going to keep moving on and look through, see which questions we can squeeze in here. So another big topic that we've been talking about is sort of inflation and salaries and staying competitive. And over the 20 years that I've been in recruitment marketing in this space, it's always gone back and forth as to, do you talk about salary ahead of time? Do you not talk about salary? When do you talk about salary? And I think the environment has changed this a little bit differently. But I also don't think that job seekers understand that the salary ranges are predetermined by the government contract. So if you can both provide some advice to our audience on how to discuss salary and future cost of living increases that they may be considering. Jess?
Sure. So as far as salary is concerned, we typically do ask that question up front as a recruiter, asking what your expectation is to make a move to a new position. That way we can understand where that candidate fits in line with the budget. If the target salary is in line, then we just carry on. If they're maybe over what we had budgeted, we offer transparency on the budget and talk about how we might make something work. We also make sure that we discuss how the compensation plan and how adjustments are planned into the contract vehicle. so that people know that they're not going to be sitting at that same salary for 5 years if they're coming in at the beginning of a contract. We anticipate that there will be cost of living adjustments on an annual basis. And we can talk about that as part of the benefit package.
Wonderful. Amy?
Yeah, we do. I agree with Jess. We do ask people up front what they're looking for. Of course, not what they're currently earning. It doesn't matter. But we do put that out there on our postings. We've gotten much better about that. And we talk about it early on. We also need to find out what's important to you guys, the job seeker, what drives you. Compensation is obviously important, but pay is not the only investment that employers make. So how can our company culture support your life? We offer flexibility when we can. You may walk away from a higher salary for the chance to work from home 3 days a week. As we're all aware, it's obviously not an employer-driven market anymore. We talk up the other benefits. We try to increase incentives. We do a lot of training. We talk about eligibility for bonuses. So we're always looking, at examining how our benefits can contribute to, your positive work experience.
Of course. And I would also add, we talk a little bit too about career progression. Salary may not be the only component. If somebody's driven and they have a goal in mind of how they want to get to that next level, we can talk through how this opportunity can support that. So
we have a question from the audience. And what's interesting is that we have both people who are active with active security clearances, but we actually have someone who has an inactive clearance. And John's question is your recommendations to him on how we should go about re-entering the community.
Sure.
So, Jess?
I can answer that in two ways. One is a lot of our contracts do require an active clearance upon hire. But we have some contracts that do not. So we have uncleared work as well. Sometimes that may be a good foray into the company, working on a program that might just have a background authorization. And then that contract could potentially support, a setup of a renewal of a contract, of a clearance at the time of entry into that uncleared program. We actually have some contracts where they will support the sponsorship of a clearance or a clearance renewal. We just wouldn't be able to make a hire until that point. So there's some discussion around it. What I recommend on your resume, put what clearance you have held in the past. And that way the recruiters can work with you to let you know whether the contract can support sponsorship of a renewal.
Wonderful. Amy, anything to add?
Everything that Jess said. We just look at the timeline of the contracts and when we can fill these roles, how long we can wait. Our offers are always contingent on, your ability to have the required clearance. So we can start the process, but it's taking longer nowadays. So, we also have other work that may not require that level of clearance. Most, if not, ability to get a CI poly. Some of the work you can start without the poly, some you can't. So it's all, we just have to have a good discussion with the recruiter up front. One of the first things we do before we even schedule an interview is check clearance, and then the dates of all that and how long time has passed. So just on an individual basis, just talk with your recruiter.
Wonderful. So we have another question from the audience that sort of is along the lines of our question that we had earlier on remote work, but it's really more along the lines of relocation in cities. So do you feel it's critical to place the current city you're applying to? Should it be reflected on your resume? There's obviously so many different opinions on this. So do you talk about where you want to be hired or where you are currently now? And how do you talk in your resume or in an interview about that you're open to relocation, but you would need some kind of assistance? So Jess?
I think transparency is always the better way to go. So if you are in a specific location with a preference to stay in that location, then put your location on the resume. It's helpful for the recruiters, especially when we're talking about an in-person requirement for the role. We need to consider people who are in that region. If it's a remote opportunity, it's not really relevant where you live, although it's helpful to know. just for the recruiter's purpose, if you get to the point of offer, we need to know which tax jurisdiction you're going to fall in. If you're open to relocation, it's worth mentioning that either in the resume or upon initial discussion with the recruiter. A lot of people will put it on their resume, open to relocation, and you don't have to put specifics around that you'd need assistance, but you can say open to it. That way recruiters can consider you for in-person roles in other cities.
Wonderful. Amy, anything else?
Everything that Jess said. I would also suggest that, even if you're, like as Jess said, the resume may say you live in Florida, but you're willing to relocate somewhere else. Sometimes we can offer relocation assistance. Sometimes we can't. Again, that's a discussion with the recruiter, right? It just depends on the budget. We'll do what we can, but we as recruiters never assume that because your resume says Florida, it doesn't mean that it doesn't disqualify you. We just want to see where you work best. And again, as Jess said, if it's remote, it's irrelevant. So.
Wonderful. So coming to our last question, which is really focused on the job fair, but I also would think it's really focused on overall job search, because one thing that I see in the community, be it the cleared community, the commercial community, is not really good follow-up after, an initial phone call or an interview or even a job fair. So what are some recommendations, Amy, as to follow up after a job fair or any kind of interaction with a company?
So I would say, firstly, obtain the recruiter's contact information if you're at the job fair. Always request a business card. We may not remember, who we've spoken with, so try to stand out. I always get a giggle on that when I get an email saying I was the one with that crazy, red tie. Like I remember those people. Stay organized. Definitely send a thank you note. 1 or 2 days later. Maintain, maybe connect on LinkedIn. Sooner is better than later. So I wouldn't, wait more than 1 or 2 days. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I always find it interesting when I talk to recruiters after a job fair and they don't get any follow-up. So Jess, what would you recommend after a job fair, or even, phone interviews, in-person interviews? What would you recommend?
Follow-up is very helpful. Even if you may not get an immediate response, it helps us recall who we talked to and helps us be able to help you navigate to the right position. I do encourage it. Keep the recruiter that you meet as a point of contact. They may not be the one who is working on a specific requisition that you're interested in, but they can be your advocate, and they can provide some context on how they met you and what the conversation was like, and really help you get that foot in the door. Because sometimes we're seeing thousands of resumes, so it's really helpful to be able to recall or to be able to advocate for somebody. So follow-up is really key, and everything Amy said, I agree with.
So I really am glad that you use that word advocate, because that is the one thing that I don't think job seekers understand, is that once you establish that connection with a recruiter, you do have an advocate. If they believe that you are the right fit, or maybe a slightly right fit for a position, they will make sure that you get into the right person to talk to, and that they will talk about you, and they are your champion. So it does behoove you to follow up with them. And I was on Twitter the other day, and someone was lamenting that they really messed up on a tech interview, and they went outside and screamed and was very angry at themselves. And I said, that's a perfect opportunity when you have a follow-up, when you have a thank you, point out, you asked me this question and the answer just sort of flew out of my head, but this is what I would say, because it shows that you're detail-oriented, you have initiative, and you're willing to do the follow-up and admit that you made a mistake, but you have the right answer. So follow-up is so key in every part of your job search, because even if you don't get that job with Amy or Jess, they may find a job later on that you're perfect for. And because you followed up and you established a relationship with them, they will remember you and they will reach back out to you. So we're preparing right now for next week's job fair. Any final words, Amy, Jess? Amy, how about you first?
Yeah, I would just say be prepared. Again, look at the list of companies that are coming. I will definitely be there next week with one of my colleagues. I would say, dress for success. I would say, preferably go alone. I don't think it's a good look to travel in herds. That's just my honest opinion. Just take the event, seriously. It could turn into an interview. It could turn into an on-site interview. A lot of us do bring our hiring managers. Be thoughtful in the questions that you ask. I wouldn't go up to a table and just say, "What jobs do you have?" Or kind of come with your little, your elevator pitch and when what you're interested in, and also just a little thing. I would turn off your cell phone because that's just really distracting. I'd be conscious of, if there's a lot of people online, just to be conscious of other people around you. Because I've been at so many job fairs, and Kathleen knows this, where you have somebody's ear for about 20, 30 minutes, and it's like, we have to move on. So the lasting impression, the 5 or 10 minute conversation is awesome, but I would say, though, save those discussions for, the next time, the follow-up. Those are my 2 cents.
Jess?
Yeah. And again, if you're really interested, make sure you're getting contact information for the person you meet. That will be your key and your foray into next steps within the jobs you're applying to.
Wonderful. Well, Jess, Amy, I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. I'm looking forward to seeing all of our job seekers next week. Thank you for your time today, Amy and Jess. And if we didn't answer any of your questions, we will be able to answer your questions through email. Just email us at customerservice@ClearedJobs.Net, and we'll get to your question and get you the answer you need. Take care. Thanks.